One.
Okay, for paper 3, your fieldwork questions, here is the physical one, and this is the write-up. You've done all the risk assessment, you understand what you did, and this is to bring together data presentation and analysis. First thing to spot is that every single sample assessment question has a space at the beginning of each fieldwork question where they may ask specifically for physical or human, but they do need you to put the title. So examine the relationship between an abiotic factor and ground cover in contrasting woodland. There's your title for your physical fieldwork. Data presentation method 1 is in fact a simple table. And you can see here you've got Transect 1, which was Sullen Woods, unmanaged, and Transect 2, home farm. Notice in Transect 1, less light, 23,000 lux, versus 67,000 lux for Transect 2. So more light in Transect 2 on the farm. The result, of course, is that there was 27% of ground coverage where there was less light and 75% where there was more light. That 75% is a number that you need to remember. It's the one number I think you should remember for this one. But the key thing is Sullen Woods, Transect 1, unmanaged, home farm, managed. While we're here, look at the sampling technique. So you use transects, and transects are a way of going across areas to be able to sample an area. And within the transect, you did a systematic every 5 meters. That means every 5 meters systematically, you then use a random sampling of putting the quadrat down to look at the percentage of vegetation cover, where you also did the light meter reading, the lux. Okay, so already we're into transects, we're into sampling methodologies. Second method of data presentation is the simple bar graph, and that shows you the red, Transect 2, very, very large amounts of light, blue in Transect 1, Sullen. Again, second data presentation, why do you use the bar chart? Because you can see, nice clear answer. And you can see the analysis, there was a difference in light levels reaching the ground cover, and you'll learn the numbers. Remember, examiners want to know that you were there and you know what you're talking about, where you talked about it. Transect 1, Sullen, low light, Transect 2, home farm, heavily managed by humans, 67,000. If we then look at the ground cover, no surprise that in Transect 1 with less light, only about 25% of ground cover, in fact, about 27%. 73%, in fact, there was no ground cover there at all because there was no light to get through, etc., etc. Over in the farm, you had the opposite. Large amounts of light got through, large amounts, 75% was the vegetation cover. So that's data presentation method 3, the pie chart, and you can see nicely showing the contrast in the places. Data presentation method, the next one, look first at the composite bar chart and line chart. Bars for light, percentage vegetation cover in red. And just looking at this graph on the right, you can see that there's some kind of relationship between them. It might not be a causal relationship. Light leads to vegetation cover, and clearly not the other way around, but you can see that there appears to be a trend. So then we did the next data presentation method, scatter graph, and from that we have plotted lux on the horizontal axis and percentage vegetation cover, and you can possibly see a trend in there. So when we possibly see a trend, bear in mind that Excel will put a line of best fit across a swarm of bees. It just does it anyway. But you can possibly see a relationship in there. But bear in mind, it's just for the sample of sites. But we can test whether or not the relationship you've seen here might actually just be caused by chance, for example, where you happen to sample. We do that with a Spearman's rank correlation test. And all that allows us to do is to eliminate mathematically chance as an explanation for the relationship you can see in that scatter graph. And lo and behold, in fact, to about a 99% probability, the relationship seen on that scatter graph has been caused by something other than chance. And that allows you to talk about the actual relationship between light and vegetation growth. Really important. If we look at the Transect 2, over on the right-hand side, the same combined graph, bar graph and line graph. Do notice one of the weaknesses in the data presentation technique is the axes are not the same. You can flick back and check for yourself. But can we see the same kind of trend in this data? So when it's high blue, do I see a high red? Well, look closely, it doesn't look like it. Over on the scatter graph, so here's a demonstration of where a data presentation technique allows us to be able to draw more conclusions. You've got a barrel of wasps flying around the place, all over the place. What does that mean? Well, if you take lux, for example, I've got lux on the horizontal axis, and here with one lux, I've got a low percentage of vegetation cover, but here with the same amount of lux, apparently I've got a high percentage vegetation cover. It's so randomized that we didn't even bother doing a Spearman's because clearly there are lots of anomalies. Conclusion, overall, to the hypothesis, there is a relationship between light and ground cover. Overall agrees with this. High levels do tend to produce high levels of vegetation cover. But remember the anomalies, really important when we evaluate that as a conclusion, all those anomalies, things that stick out from those broad trends. The second hypothesis, aimed towards our title, looks at a more qualitative assessment of the human impact. And what Mr. Metcalf has done here is he's put some images and some comments on the right-hand side. Clearly, if your sample happened to hit some of these things, it will throw up an anomaly. The most obvious one, I like this one, is the reservoir in the gravel lake. Clearly lots of light and clearly no vegetation, but it's an anomaly, isn't it? You know, if there's no light, there should be vegetation. Why isn't there? Because it's aquatic. You do the math. So anomaly, anomaly, anomaly. Anomalies, of course, are the kinds of words that examiners really love. And here's, again, a really good example, human machinery in action. Economic use of woodland, worth thinking about that for your NAP wood case study for paper 1. Quite obvious what happens there. So if we look overall then, overall the woodland investigation was a success. Data collection showed a link between light cover and vegetation, with anomalies clearly seen in Transect 2, which gave us this difficulty of being able to do the Spearmans and making a conclusion, which therefore relates to human activity, clearly plays a significant role in impacting vegetation cover, positively and negatively. A quick summary for you. On the left-hand side, you've got the 6 stages of inquiry that the AQA are interested in, and each of these you may think will give a question. So it's worth making sure that you can summarize quickly all of the points relative to each of those sections. So for example, they might say with reference to a physical fieldwork, evaluate the geographical inquiry. There's some points there. Good luck. Reread it, have a look at it again. If you've got any questions, ask your teacher.